Sequence mode. So you've just encountered a sequence question, and it says you're going to have a loan for $200,000 to buy a house. All right. Do you remember, first of all, how sequences start? It's got this kind of crazy notation. This, by the way, for anybody watching the video, is in the context of we're reviewing for the final, and this is my first hour class, and it's our last day of review for the final, and I'm opening up to questions. Kids can ask about anything we've done this semester. So somebody asked about sequences, and in semester 2 final, sequences are on the final. So how does sequence start? Yes, sir? Yes, that is definitely u sub n equals u sub n minus 1. That's the kind of notation we want. But do you remember on the very first number, that's either u sub what or u sub what? Usually u sub 0 or u sub 1. And if you're doing a real world question, do you remember time in experiments and stuff always starts at 0. So you use u sub 0. Is this ringing a bell? Okay, I want to show you in a minute how that goes in the calculator again. But first of all, if you haven't already, put your calculator into sequence mode. Under the modes, one of the options is function, which is probably what you're in right now. Then one of them's SEQ. Look for that. Mode SEQ, sequence mode. All right. And let's say that this loan is got 5% interest. Does that sound somewhat believable? I mean, nobody charges like 25% interest, do they? Well, credit cards do. One of the reasons you really want to avoid credit cards is they charge more interest than anything. They're just way, way, way higher. And then how do you usually pay your interest and your principal in payments that are what? Monthly. So what number should I put down there? 12 times per year, because this is a per year amount. And so the little 12 divided by 12 means, and if you put it in on your calculator, you don't need to put parentheses here because it'll follow the order of operations, which is the divide will come before the add. So as long as you have a little divide sign between the whole 5 and the 12, it'll work. Then the last thing is, if this is an investment, Aunt Tilly just gave you 200 grand when she died, then it would be plus whatever you want to add to it. But if it's a loan, then it'll be a minus. Do you remember that distinction? That's the only way you can tell from one of these equations if it's a loan or if it's investment. The minus would be a loan because you're paying it off. Your 200,000 should shrink each month as you pay payments of, let's make it 2,000. There is an equation. Now, let's say the test has got one that's got 4% interest. Well, you can leave this in your calculator, just change that 5 to a 4, 04. And then let's say it's done quarterly. You could change the 12. What do you think quarterly would mean? How many times per year? 4. Let's say it's done biannually. Bi means 2. Biannually, it's twice a year. That'd be a 2 down here. But usually we do it monthly. Okay, and the last thing is, question first. There's a question hand in the back there. Yeah, I'm going to tell you the calculator stuff in a minute. Just hold on a sec. All right, so last thing is a domain. If you were writing this out, there's a free response section of the test. Do you remember you're supposed to say n is greater than or equal to 1. It's always 1 bigger than whatever that is. Okay, so if we started with a 1, that would be n is greater than or equal to 2 if we had started with a 1 at the top. Okay, have you got those back in your head before I get to the calculator part? Is there any questions that are not about the calculator? Yes? Yes, you may. Yes? If the u sub here was a 1, then you'd say n is greater than or equal to 2. Okay, so now let's put it in the calculator. I'm going to pause for a second while I get that up on my screen. Putting here. Okay, so the first thing I got to do with my calculator is get in the right mode. I got to get it into sequence mode, which is right there. And sequence mode is the right one. When I hit y equals, it looks like that. And the first question they ask is n min, which is what is the minimum, the smallest n? And since our n numbers are these little guys right here, what is our smallest n? It's 0. So our n min is 0. So I got a 0 there. Cool. And then I have it already in here, just like I said for you. Even though I was in parametric mode, it saved my last equation that was in sequence mode. So do you get what I mean? If we're going to have a nice equation sitting in your sequence mode, all ready for you in case you need it. That would be smart. All right, so u, and then parentheses means like sub, u sub n minus 1 times, can you twist that to undo the lock? Okay. Times 1 plus, mine's got 0.03, so see how easy it's going to be for me to change this? If I want to make this a 5% interest, then I just got to go 5. And then my payments of 7, whatever that was, I'm going to change it to 2,000 for my payments. And then that is 20,000. I better change it to 200,000. There. That's how you'd put it in. Do you get if the loan amount changed to you're borrowing 5,000 to buy a motorcycle or something, then you just change that one number and you're good. All right. Now, when I say you're good, what does that mean? Well, what we could do with these is we could figure out how much interest you paid. That's a typical question. Or how much total you had to pay for this $200,000 loan. And honestly, as a person who paid off their house over time, it's depressing because you're like, I thought I borrowed $110,000 to buy my house because that's what I had to borrow, is $110,000. But when you're all done, you actually paid like $160,000. Why? Why do you pay so much more than you actually borrowed? Interest. So, all right. So let's do a typical question about this. And let's see if you remember how to do this. Hint, you're going to find your answers on the table. All right. I'm going to go to second table. And my table, if it like runs forever, like mine is doing right now, it might be on a weird starting number. Do you remember how the starting number is changed under table settings? And if I want my settings to be like, well, I know that I'm not going to pay this off after only like 2 years. I'm going to go out to like 4 years at minimum. And that would be what? 4 times 12, 48. I'm going to change mine to a starting place of 48. And I don't even know if that's right, but then I'm going to go to my table and find out. Go to your 48th month and see if the thing's paid off. Well, how do you know if it's paid off? You look and see if the number has shrunk to 0 yet. Is our number at least shrinking every month? Yes, but it's not done shrinking. Okay, so somebody smart is going to guess it. Go to the table settings and try a number you think is about right and find the moment where it goes to 0, or technically it'll go to negative something. Can anybody tell me where it was? Found it? Month what? Month 130. Awesome. Everybody go on your Y or your table settings, unless you want to hit down arrow like 60 times. I personally will go, I'm going to go to 125. You could have gone right to 130, that'd be fine. But I like to see it evolve from smaller, smaller, smaller to 0 or negative. All right, so that's a pretty intense question. If this came up on an ACT test, hey, at least you'd be fresh and know how to do it. Now, when it turns negative, don't forget that that's the amount that they owe you. That's really true. On your very last payment you make on your house, for instance, if you make a full-size payment, they're going to have gotten extra money. By law, they can't just keep it. Like, ooh, they screwed up, I get to keep. No, they have to mail you a check back for the extra that you paid that you weren't supposed to. So on this payment, right here, yay, you're paid off at 130 payments, and they owe you $742.10. All right, so here's the thing that people get confused about. They know, obviously, 130 is a big deal, but they get confused on exactly what to do with that. I'd like you to see if you can tell me, with that, using that 130, how much total did you pay for this loan? Pause for a second, because that would be a typical question on this. How much total? You're thinking 200,000? No, it's obviously more than that. So how do you use the 130 to tell how much total you paid for that loan? I want to pause for a second while you give that one a try. All right. How many of you figured out that the 130 was how many payments you had, and so therefore it was 130 times 2,000? Raise your hand if you knew to do that much. Good. Was there more? Yeah. Because that's how much total you paid, but what's that little negative number? That's money they owe you back. So you should have then subtracted 700. Somebody that's got it on the calculator. What is it? 700 what? 742 point what? Thank you. You'd subtract that off because they owe you that money back. There's your final answer, which somebody must have done. 200 and what thousand? Point what? Thank you. So that means you actually paid 259,000 for your loan that was supposed to be 200,000. Why is it more? Because of interest. So if you wanted to get your interest amount, you would simply subtract off the 200,000 at this point, and you'd know how much total you paid in interest. Those are the two toughest questions in the sequence unit. Yes? This is 5%, and if you were going to go get a house today, if I know you're pretty young, but let's say that 4 or 5 years from now, you graduate from college, you get a job, and you will get a house loan. It's typically about 4.5% right now. But if you had bad credit, it could easily be 5%. So this isn't unrealistic, and that's not bad credit. That would just be like kind of not great credit. So that makes a big difference. I wish I was, if I were teaching you when you're in college, I would be telling you how to build your credit. Basically, it's simple. It's not that simple, but you just never make a late payment, like ever. If you ever have a payment on something and you're late, it makes this negative score on your credit. All of a sudden, now your credit's only 600, where your friends might be a 780, and they're going to get a way better interest rate on their house someday, just because of one dumb late payment. Like, never, ever have a late payment. That's the best advice I can give you. The other one is don't take out too much in debt. If you have a credit card and you've maxed it out, your credit isn't going to be as good as your friend who's got a credit card with no balance on it. That's another. Obviously, who would you rather lend money to? Somebody who's maxed out their credit cards? And that's not as good of a risk as somebody who hasn't. But don't max out your credit cards. Never have a late payment, and you'll have pretty good credit. Yes? It would get better, yes. It's not like it's permanently that way. As soon as you get your credit cards paid down, it right away, within a month or so, it changes your credit and says, oh, now they're a better risk. So yeah, somebody who's about to get a house, they typically, if they're smart, they're trying to clean up their credit and make it look really good, because at that moment when they get the loan, if their credit score is low, I mean, it can cost you a lot. Like if we change this to 4% interest, because your friend who's got better credit than you gets a 4% interest and you get a 5%, I bet you the difference would be like 30,000 in interest. It's amazing how much interest it would be. Let's not do it because it'll take too much time, but easily could make the argument that over the course of a home loan that you might pay 30,000 more if you have worse credit. You see why they sometimes say that the rich get richer? Because if they're really smart with their credit, they got a better interest rate. They have 30,000 more in their pocket over the course of the next 10 years, which they could invest. And the person who wasn't smart about their credit and is making late payments and has maxed out their credit cards, they pay 30,000 more in interest. And so they're hurt even worse, you know what I mean, than they were. So, all right. Okay, so that's enough about sequences. Now, somebody by now must have looked through that packet thingy and found a question that they kind of got stumped on. Is there any other topics you'd like to talk about besides sequences? Or unless, if you have a follow-up on the sequence thing, I could do one more sequence thing, I can. First, let's do follow-ups to sequence. Any last questions about this? Are there quite types of questions about sequences you'd want to know? That's about as hard as they get right there. Okay, and if it's not sequences, raise your hand and I'll just get the ideas first, and then we'll see which one the class wants to hear the most. Yes? Growth and decay. So, like, are you talking about in the context of sequences, or... I can't remember exactly where I think that number comes in more than once. I think it comes in exponentials, like this. Does that ring a bell? Do you remember this? Is that the kind of growth and decay you're talking about? Okay, good. That's called exponential. And then, what was your question about before I forget about it? Oh, okay, good. All right. So the two questions I had about exponentials here is how do you graph them and how do you talk about growth and decay? All right, first of all, if that number there is bigger than 1, it will be growth. Okay, if it's less than 1, if it comes out to like 0.6, that means it's decaying and it's getting smaller, smaller, smaller. Okay, so the growth and decay, I can just answer your question pretty simply by saying, if this is bigger than 1, you got growth. And if it's smaller than 1, it's decay. But how would the question be worded on the test? Here's one with this. Would you please answer this question? What is the growth rate versus what is the common, remember this? Remember, pull out the word, common what? No, common difference is where you add something each time. This is multiplying by this, so it's common ratio. Very good. There's two different numbers. Compare with the kid next to you and see if you know what the growth rate versus the common ratio is. They're different. Common ratio is a number. Growth rate is a percent. Try to figure out which one's which here. Okay, so the growth rate, 50%. I know some kids are probably going to argue that that was 5%. It would have to be 0.05 to be 5% growth. That's 0.5, so therefore it's 50%. The part that's above 1, that's the growth. What if that had been minus like 0.15? Then it would be decay of 15%. The idea? All right, common ratio is the 1.5. I'm going to give you another one that's like that. And now, just this time, I'll actually do something I can graph. All right, because somebody asked me about graphing. That looks different than what I just said, but you should still be able to figure out what's the growth rate. Yes, it is growth. And what is the common ratio? The growth rate and the common ratio. Hint. There's a 2 there. Last time, I put a 1 plus 0.5. Do you get, I could put 1 plus 1 there. So if you said it's 200% growth, you are wrong. You should have written this as 5 and then 1 plus 1 to the x. Was anybody actually able to do that? Anybody do that? Oh, awesome. A few of you remembered that. That is so cool to see somebody remembering it. 1 plus 1 is so much better than 2 because it says it's 100% growth. That is not 200% growth. The growth is just the part that's above 1. He times by 1, it doesn't do anything. He times by 1 point something. It's whatever the point, the thing after the 1. Whatever's more than 1, that's what makes it grow. So it's 100% growth rate. The common ratio, however, was the 2. That big number altogether. Think you can get that right now? Okay, what's your best friend in graphing? Somebody just asked, how do you graph these things? What's your best friend in graphing? I've given you this a million times. XY chart. Because if you don't remember anything about what this looks like, you just graph a bunch of points. So, Mr. F, give me some points. Give me something for X. No, the guy who raised his hand. Mr. OF. Okay, so if I put in X equals 1, I'm going to put it there? And do it in your head. What's Y equal to? Excellent. Now give me some more. 2, and then I put a 2 here, and then I get what? All right, give me some smaller ones. All right, 1/2 I'm going to call that. So do you remember what the 1/2 power actually means? It means square root of. But that's kind of a nasty one now that we tried it. Okay, -1, let's do that. Because we get to pick, so why pick things that are really challenging? I'm going to change up and go, okay, let's put in -1. 2 to the negative 1, that flips it and makes it what? 1/2. And then 5 times 1/2, 2.5. Now that I have these points, I could graph them, and I think you'll recognize it. This is growth, and it's exponential because the x is in the exponent. Do you remember exponential growth kind of looks like that? All right, that's the exponential growth graph. And remember, if you get stuck on graphing and you go to this, I will be so proud if I see that written in the margins on your test, because that's your way to graph anything. Because you are likely to forget stuff. Like, dang, I can't remember how to graph this kind. Well, like, what if it's this? You're like, I don't remember what those look like. Well, make an XY chart. Graph a few points. And if you end up graphing a few points and they come out kind of like this, there's one here, there's one here, there's one there. Oh yeah, that's right. They're the ones that go like that. That's exponential decay. After you graph a few points, it'll remind you where it is. All right. Definitely a lot of things to know for this final, isn't there? Now, it's a lot on you. This is your personal responsibility. And if you're like struggling to stay with this, you really need to take the time to like go back and review all this stuff. I can't do it for you. I don't have enough time. I can't do everything we did. But I did make something cool that a lot of classes don't have. You have the videos of every single lesson I ever taught all year long. Now, can you watch all of those? Of course not. But you could watch the review videos. You know what I mean? Like, let's say you realize, oh man, I'm terrible at sequences. There's a review for sequences. If you want to find it, there's 2 ways you can do it. I'm going to pull it up on my site here and show you how you could search the videos for things. If you go to servervideo.com, I think you know that's where I store them. And here I am in servervideo.com. And it's got a list, and it looks like June 1st was the last video that I posted. That makes sense. That was Friday. Do you know that you could just scroll down and you could find every single video I ever did all year? Here's one from May 7th. Here's in April. If I give YouTube time, it'll eventually show me everything in order that we did. So if you want, remember, look, HPC stands for Honors Pre-Calc. That's not what we are in this class. This is Honors Higher Algebra. So look for the HHA ones. Okay, but if you want like linear programming help, there's the review for the test right there. And another beautiful thing is, it's not like having me where you can't shut me up. If you have the video, you can like go, okay, I know that part, fast forward. You know what I mean? Drag it a little over, see if there's something else better later. You can get really fine-tuned on exactly the help you want. One more thing. If you search, do you get if you search up here in the top search bar, you're searching all of YouTube? But if you want to search here, you're searching just my channel. Do you get the difference there? If you just want to stay in my channel, and let's say that you are intrigued by this thing I was calling parametrics, and you're like, I wonder what that's about. I type in the word parametric, it'll pull up all the videos I ever did on parametrics, and you could just search those. See what I'm saying? So use the lower search bar if you want to find videos that would help you the most. All right, that's one of the best ways you can study for my class, because I took the time to record all of them. They're all there for you now. Okay. I also, as I told you before, I'm going to record the questions the kids ask in all my different classes, and I'll post them, and I'll call it, this one's going to be called Hour 1 Review for the Semester 2 Final. The other one will be called Hour 3 and then Hour 4, so you could look those up too if you want. Okay, so those are some good questions. I'm willing to take one more. Is there anything else on the packet that you'd like for the class to discuss? Because we haven't talked about it lately anyway. Yes, ma'am. Could you read me number 28 on the packet? Oh, it's about logs. Read me that 4 answer choices. Log base 2 of 6. Okay. Give me another one. Okay. And All right. Just so you know, none of these are nice. So what you have to do is kind of change it to something close so you can estimate it. If I change this to something that is nice, and what do you mean by nice, Mr. Sir? It'll have the same base as the 2 does. You know what I'm saying? Now, first of all, if you had a calculator, you could just type all these in the calculator and find out what their actual decimal answers are? That would work. And it wouldn't be that fast, but it would work. You could go log 6 divided by log 2. Get a decimal, keep getting the decimals, and then you could answer the question, which one's in the range that they want. Okay? But if I'm doing it, I would go like this. You get this is really close to 8. 9 and 8 are really close to each other. And 8 is really 2 to the 3rd. So do you get that this answer is just a little more than 3? Think about that. If these were this way, the answer would be 3. So do you get it's just a smidge more than 8? So that's a smidge more than 3. So it's like 3.2 or something. That's an estimate on that one. How about this one? Do you get that that's really close to 32? Why did I change this to 32? Because estimates are okay here. Remember, it's at a range, right? So then 32 is really 2 to the 5th. So that means that's really close to 5, except a little more or a little less. Well, the answer was a little bit more, so it's 5 point something, like 5.2. See how I'm doing these in my head? All right. So you can either do them in the calculator or you can do them in your head. And once you get the answers as decimals, you can be like, okay, which one's in the range that you wanted? Do you want to talk more about logs? We did talk about it a little bit on the first day. All right, I see some people are shaking their head, so I'll take one more question. Yes? Sure. Brief linear programming. So you got, I know you know that this has shading here, and then there'll be another line that's like got shading here. And I think by now you've figured out that these are the important spots and that the corners are the most important of the important spots. So what's hard on this unit? What's hard is when I give you this equation and this equation, and then you got to figure out where they cross. Say I have this one, and I get it solved for y. First of all, solve them for y. Then it comes down to this. This is negative 3 over 2x plus 6. And then this red equation, let's say it's y equals 1/3 x plus 2. How am I supposed to tell where those two things cross? Option A, you hit graph, and you go into graph, and you graph both equations, and you go second calculate intersect. I'd like you to try that method right now. Grab your calculator, type in the green one, type in the red one, and then second calculate intersect. And this will also remind you how to get out of the mode you're in. Go to mode sequence, get rid of a sequence, put it into mode function. James Brown's favorite mode, funk mode. That'll be the hard thing on the test is I know you know how to graph them. I know you know that the shading's important. You know, I could see you making dumb little easy mistakes there, but the hard thing is how to find where the two things cross. All right, I think it's smarter for me to not try to put that all into the calculator right now because it'll take too long. If you're putting that in your calculator, some thoughts. This little sign here has to be the negative sign. If you use a minus sign right there, the calculator is just going to die. It's not going to graph it. It's going to go, and then you'd say go to, and it would show you where the problem is, and it would blink right on that sign. And hopefully that would be a sign to you that there's something wrong with the sign. Okay. So anyway, you get two things graphed, and then you go second calculate intersect. And then it asks you three questions. It's got like a little spider thing, and it says, am I on the first curve? And you say yes. And then you hit by enter. And then it goes, am I on the second curve? And you say yes. And then I get close, and then you get close and guess, and it's right there. And then you hit enter, and then it says LP, what did you get? 2.18, comma. Raise your hand if you had those right. All right, good. If you didn't know how to do that, you can always come up and ask me one-on-one for calculator help during the rest of the review time here. Okay. So now, let's just talk general. I'll answer individual questions after I hit stop in the review. What would I do to review? I would do this entire packet. I am going to have a Dropbox where you are going to put it. And if I am really making a tough call on a kid where they like did their final and they come out and they're like, dang, the kid's close, technically doesn't meet my requirements for bumping them up, I go look at your packet and they've done every problem, that's going to say, they were really trying hard. If I go look at their packet and they didn't put one in there, like means probably didn't do the review packet, do you think I feel like, oh, this kid deserves a break? The kid didn't even try to do the packet, so then how are they supposed to? Of course they didn't do well on the final. You know what I mean? So there's going to be a Dropbox for this. I'm not saying that it's going to count big in your grade, but I am saying that if I'm making a tough call and I see a kid who really tried hard by doing all the bracket problems, then I'm going to feel differently about that than the kid that didn't. Okay? So, your call. Do them, don't do them. It's up to you. I don't need you to do every single problem. But if I see a kid that's only did like 4 questions, of course they're going to struggle on the final one. And I wouldn't be surprised. And I wouldn't give them a break either. Yes? Yes, the answer key is posted now. If you haven't looked lately, the answer key is there. Because a kid on Saturday morning emailed me and said, Mr. Service, the answers still aren't there. And I instantly dropped what I was doing, and I went and I posted them immediately. So if that ever happens, you just got to talk to me. I will fix it. Any other questions? Yes? Yes, at the end, I take care of the throwing. You don't pick the assignments to throw out. The computer will automatically pick the assignments that are hurting you the most, and it will throw out the lowest, and it depends on what I put in, whether I put in the lowest 2 or the lowest 3 assignments. So we are going to throw out at least 2. And anyway, so any other questions? All right, that's it for the video for today. You got other videos you can watch of the other hours too, and the questions they asked. Good luck on your final.